In this course, we are going to cover Palo Alto, right? And in Palo Alto, we are going to cover certification like PCNSA and PCNAC we are going to cover. There are other certification as well, like PCCSA certification, okay, which is for the cyber security student. And in PCCSA certification, basically, it covers about what are the latest type of trend in terms of cyber attack, okay. And mitigation here, it is not talk about the mitigation. Let's say there is any attack, but attack name this certification is going to talk about, but not the major mitigation. So this is purely for the cyber security student. But if you just want to go for the network security and you just want to manage the firewall, so for that we have a PCNSA and PCNSE certification, right? So PCNSA, this is administrator level certification, and PCNSE it is an advanced level certification. So we are going to cover both over here. And if I talk about why Palo Alto, so Palo Alto is a market leader nowadays. It's a next generation firewall, and you can manage this firewall with Panorama, and you can also manage this firewall individually. This firewall having a single pass parallel processing architecture, which making this firewall very fast. And the other thing in this firewall, management and data plane has been segregated in terms of they both plane are using a dedicated CPU and dedicated uh, RAM. And this firewall can be deployed on premises and can also be deployed on the cloud also. And also this is supporting central log collection. The Palo Alto firewall is a market leader, and this is a traditional architecture where a same packet would go with the repetition process. Like in traditional firewall, if you send the packet from source to destination, so in each module it is checking same thing. But in Palo Alto firewall, this is using single pass parallel processing architecture, where the packet would be sent through the firewall, and the app ID, user ID, content ID, all these things would checked at once in a single go. And to support this, we have a parallel processing hardware. So parallel processing hardware can be managed through management plane, or we can say control plane. And you can see that for networking, we have a networking function, we have networking hardware. For security, we have security type of hardware. For example, content ID is part of security. And for content, etc., we have a dedicated hardware. So these are hardware is known as a parallel processing hardware. And this is a software feature, which is single pass feature, that a software feature. So overall, we can say that Palo Alto is supporting SP3 architecture, which is single pass parallel processing. And due to this architecture, Palo Alto is very fast in terms of processing the packet. This is a initial packet flow of Palo Alto firewall, that Palo Alto firewall process the packet in 5 phases. In first phases, it is checking initial packet processing, where it is checking source zone in the packet, user ID in the packet. If source zone and user ID is present, then it would go for next one, where it is looking routing, and then it is looking the destination zone, and finally it is doing the NAT evaluation. If everything is okay in initial packet processing, the packet would go to next stage, where it is going to check security pre-policy, where it is going to check whether the port for which user is trying to access, whether that port is allowed. If it is allowed, then session would be created, and then it would go for the application identification over here. So if there is a packet, encrypted packet, Palo Alto would decrypt that, and post decrypting that, it would try to identify the app ID. App ID means the packet is accessing which application that it would be able to identify. Okay, once app ID would be identified, the packet would go to next one, where it is checking security policy. Okay, and in security policy, it is checking that whether in this packet required any security checks. If security checks required, then it is going to check the security based on the security profile. So when I say security checks, that means it's checking whether whether in the packet it required to be scanned through IPS, whether the antivirus scanning is required. If required, then it is checking the antivirus. Okay. And after security policy processing, it would go to post policy processing, where it is going to re-encrypt the traffic if it has decrypted at this level, and then it is going to apply the final NAT and then going to forward the packet. So this is the packet process by the Palo Alto Firewall. Now I'm talking about different model. In Palo Alto Firewall, we have a different model. A Palo Alto Firewall you can deploy as a hardware, or you can deploy as a virtual machine also. Okay, so like in uh, in any like as any company, they are providing different capacity of the firewall in terms of hardware. Okay, so there are different model in the Palo Alto firewall with supporting different throughput, and that we are going to talk about. So let's say someone is saying that I just want to deploy firewall in my organization. So which firewall is suitable for my organization? How you would be saying that which firewall is suitable? Whether they should go for the hardware firewall, or whether they should go and deploy a virtual machine, a firewall as a virtual machine. Okay, so how you would be taking the decision? So based on the user requirement, you are going to take the decision. You would take the requirement from the user. For example, how much traffic they have in the network. Okay, what all the feature required. So based on the requirement, you are going to suggest the firewall. Okay, you are going to suggest whether they should go via whether they should go for hardware firewall, or whether they should go for the software firewall. The software firewall means the virtual machine version of the Palo Alto. Okay, usually you would see that in enterprise level organization, mostly people prefer hardware firewall. Okay, in enterprise level, they don't prefer VM based firewall. So I'm going to talk about here what are the hardware firewall model available. For a small business you can purchase firewall, or if you have a large business, okay, large data center, to protect large data center as well, the organization can purchase the firewall. So Palo Alto, as a vendor, they provide a different capacity of the hardware, okay, that user can purchase according to their business requirement. So here there are some series that we will talk about. Okay, these are the series from the Palo Alto firewall, and these are the physical firewall. That means these are the physical appliances. So we have 4K series, 2K series, and 500 series. These are the series of the firewall. And if you see the 4K series over here, so you can see Palo Alto 4060. This is one of the model, and this Palo Alto 5060. This is providing 10 Gbps firewall throughput. So what is the meaning of firewall throughput? So let's understand in this way. The firewall throughput, we can say that if you have a firewall over here, okay, and if this firewall is receiving the packet at the rate of 10 Gbps, so all the packet it would be able to process that. Let's say this is ingress interface of the firewall, and this is egress interface of the firewall. And if it is receiving the packet at the rate 10 Gbps, so my firewall would be able to process this traffic without any issue. But let's say I'm using this series of firewall, but my throughput is more than that. My requirement is more than that. The backend who is sending the traffic, it is sending the traffic more than 10 Gbps. Maybe it is sending the traffic at 11 Gbps rate. So what would happen on that cases? My firewall would not work. My firewall is going to process up to only 10 Gbps. If that is more than, I mean, traffic is more than that, then there would be slowness. User may experience slowness. Say according to our requirement, we can purchase the firewall. Maybe on that cases, if we have a requirement more than 10 Gbps, maybe we have to look another firewall. But this series of the firewall, 4060 series of the firewall, this is going to process the packet on the on the rate of 10 Gbps. This is a firewall throughput. But you know, if you just using a firewall, then it is supporting 10 Gbps. But with the firewall, if you are using threat prevention as well, threat prevention is a IPS module. This is IPS module, right? Threat prevention is a IPS module. So with IPS, this is not going to support 10 Gbps, but it is going to support 5 Gbps only. If you enable firewall plus threat prevention, these two modules, so it is going to support the traffic on the rate of 5 Gbps. Okay. So you know what is the function of IPS? What is the function of IPS? Okay, so let me tell you. The IPS, which is known as an intrusion prevention system, in Palo Alto, we say that is a threat prevention system. So basically, this IPS is used to protect the network against the vulnerability. Okay, now I would talk about this. Let me clear this. Let's talk about a little bit about IPS, which is known as an intrusion prevention system. So it prevents, I can say it prevents against the vulnerability. If we have any vulnerability, then against those vulnerability, it is going to prevent them. So for example, I would take example. Let's say in my network, we have some operating system running. Okay. And this operating system is serving server purposes. We have some application as well. And you know, both are this operating system and application is not patched. Both are not patched. Okay. So if these server and application is not patched, so these server and application is vulnerable. Okay. Why it is vulnerable? Because you know that if the software is not updated or application is not updated, so there could be chances that there could be some vulnerability on that. So these server and application are vulnerable. So what attacker would try to do? Attacker would try to send the attack to the server or to the application, okay, so that it can compromise these vulnerability. It can exploit these vulnerability, whatever the vulnerability would be, okay. So there are chances that our network could get hacked or our server or application could get hacked. So what we have, if we have firewall, let's say we have a firewall. So what firewall is going to do? On firewall, we can define if the traffic is coming from X location to Y server, okay, this server, traffic should be allowed or traffic should be denied for a specific port. But sometimes we need to, you know, open the port so that outside user can access, okay. So let's say we have opened the port for this outside user who would try to access this server, but the server is, you know, vulnerable, and this is not user but this is attacker. He would try to exploit the vulnerability and my traffic would get passed through the firewall. But if I am going to use IPS, okay, with the firewall, if I'm going to use IPS, if this attacker is sending any malicious code to the server, so my IPS would be able to detect that. How it is detecting? Based on the signature, it would be able to detect that, and it would be able to block the malicious packet over here. Only normal packet would be going to the server, but if there is kind of any malicious script that user attacker is trying to send to the server, it is going to be, it is going to be filtered by the firewall. The firewall is going to drop that. So any malicious script can be, can be blocked by the firewall with the IPS feature. So if attacker is trying to do a kind of intrusion to the server, my IPS would be able to block this. And that's why this is known as an intrusion prevention system. Okay, so I mean to say, if you are using this feature, threat prevention or intrusion prevention feature, so at that time, the firewall would be providing the throughput of 5 Gbps. Okay, and this much session, total session in the firewall can be supported up to this much. Okay, so you know the session. Session means number of connection going through the firewall. How much the connection would be? This much connection can be supported by the firewall. For SFP, we have a 10 gig. For SFP, you would find in the firewall 10 gig. I mean, there would be 4 interface that can be used as a 10 gig. And there would be 4 other interface that can be used as a 1 gig. So this is the hardware feature. And then we have another series of the firewall. Here you can see we have different hardware feature. And we have 2050 series of the firewall where you can see the firewall throughput is 1 Gbps. So can you can you guess the cost of these appliances, which would be higher, whether this appliance cost would be higher or this one? Obviously, the firewall which is having less throughput, that would be cheaper. So this firewall would be cheaper in compared to this firewall. This may be costly and this would be cheaper because here you are getting firewall throughput how much? 1 Gbps. So let's say you have a small business. Why you go for this particular firewall? You can use this firewall. So as per use, you can select your hardware. Okay. So in this firewall, it is supporting 1 Gbps firewall throughput, 500 Mbps threat prevention throughput, and 250,000 session you can create maximum. 16 interface you would see that are the gigabit interface, and those are the copper interface. And for SFP you can see over here. What is the use of SFP? You know, SFP are the pluggable, pluggable module, you can say. So let's say you have a SFP, 4 SFP. That means these are the pluggable. So here you can use either copper-based SFP or you can use fiber-based SFP. That means you have a choice to select whether you would go for the copper interface or whether you go for the fiber interface. But these, if you see 16 copper gigabit interface, these are the fixed interface. There you can only connect your copper cable, which is your UTP cable or STP cable. But here you can connect either your copper cable. If you use copper based SFP, so you can connect your either copper cable, or if you use fiber based SFP, you can connect a fiber cable there. So that's the benefit. Okay, now I'm moving to next one, and I would talk about 3K appliances. So let's talk about this. These are the another hardware series in the Palo Alto. This is 3050 series of the hardware. These are the appliances, and you would see the model of this looks like in this way. In this firewall, this is supporting 4 Gbps firewall throughput. Okay. So basically, if you enable application ID, so with application ID, you are going to get 4 Gbps firewall throughput. What is the application ID? So in Palo Alto Firewall, not only you can define the port, okay, you can also define the application. For example, let's say you are trying to access any services. I would say, let's say you are trying to access www.zoom.us. This domain you just want to access. So if this domain you just want to access, zoom.us, so basically this domain belongs to which uh, uh, sorry, which feature? This domains belongs to web conferencing feature, because Zoom is providing web conferencing or online meeting or online chat you can enable over here. So this zoom.us in the Palo Alto firewall, if the traffic going for the zoom.us, so Palo Alto firewall would be able to identify the application, because this zoom.us may be working on port number 443, right? But apart from port number, it would be able to identify the traffic is for which destination. So it would be able to identify traffic is for Zoom application. So if traffic is for Zoom application, what all the things you can control for this application? Maybe you just want to enable, just you want to enable voice calling. So if you just want to enable voice services, so you can enable voice services only. Okay, so application ID is providing you more granularity to control the application or to identify the application. This is working app ID, this feature working on a layer 7. When I say layer 7, that means it is working on an application layer. Okay, so when it is working on an application layer of OSI model, there you can provide more control, and more control you can get. So maybe on Zoom we have a different type of services, because Zoom is not only for the online meeting, but through this you can do online chatting, you can do whiteboard sharing, okay, you can do file sharing, etc. You can do a lot of things. So with application ID, you can control a lot of things in the Palo Alto firewall. So maybe in your Palo Alto firewall, you just want to allow that user should be able to do voice calling or video calling, but they won't be able to transfer the file, or they won't be able to make online chat. That you can control from Palo Alto firewall as well. So if a firewall is using, uh, application ID, so with application ID, a firewall is providing 4 Gbps of throughput. And with threat prevention, it is providing 2 Gbps throughput. Okay. But if you are using a VPN feature, for VPN, IPsec VPN, this is providing 500 Mbps throughput. A maximum session on this firewall can be created 500,000. And per second, this firewall would be supporting 50,000 sessions. 200 IPsec VPN tunnel interface can be created. So when you just want to create IPsec VPN, for creating of IPsec VPN, what you require a tunnel interface. Okay, so maximum 2000 IPsec VPN tunnel can be created. Okay, and for each interface, for each tunnel, what we required tunnel interface. So up to 2000 tunnel interface can be created. Up to 2000 SSL VPN user can be created. I mean, up to 2000 SSL VPN user can be login into this firewall. 10 virtual router it is going to create. Virtual router is what? This is for routing segregation. So if you just want to do routing segregation, okay, so you can use a virtual router. So how many virtual router you can create? You can create 10 virtual router. 6 virtual system can be created maximum. Okay, what is a virtual system? If you just want to virtualize your firewall within the firewall, physical firewall, if you just want to create logical firewall, okay, so that you can dedicate for different tenant. So you can create a VCs. So how many VCs can be created? Maximum there would be 6 VCs could be created. So if you have one firewall, within that one firewall, up to 6 virtual firewall you can create. This is known as a virtual system. Up to 40 security zones can be created. Okay, so what is the security zone? So basically in the network segment, we usually define that a particular network portion belongs to which area, and that area we can say that is a security zone. Okay, so logically we define that if you just want to logically segregate our network, so for that we use zones. Okay, like internal, external, DMZ, these are the zones example. So how many security zone you can create maximum in this firewall? Up to 40. And 500 maximum number of policy, 5,000 maximum number of policy rules you can write in this firewall. Okay, so this is the 3K series of firewall. So this is a 3K series of firewall. We have other model as well. Let's talk about that. We have appliance 5K series. In this 5K series, you can see this is 5060 appliance, and this 5060 sorry 5K series of appliance, you are going to see more into the data center. So if there is a large data center, to prevent that data center, organization use enterprise level of firewall, which is 5060. 5060 is the enterprise level of firewall. Here you can see the capacity of this firewall. It is providing 20 Gbps firewall throughput, 10 Gbps threat prevention throughput, 4 Gbps IPsec throughput it is going to provide. 20,000 SSL VPN user can be, can be onboarded on this firewall. Okay, up to this much session it can create. Up to 225 virtual system can be created. That means logically, if you just want to create a firewall, up to 225 virtual firewall you can create. For SFP in this firewall, you are going to see that would be 10 gig. 8 SFP in this firewall would be 1 gig, and 12 interface. These are the fixed interface. It is going to provide 10 Mbps, 100 Mbps, or 1000 Mbps throughput. Up to 1 gig, 1000 Mbps is up to 1 gig throughput it is going to provide for the firewall. Is that clear? Now moving to next. Now I'm talking about a higher end model. So if you are using a higher end model, so it is not necessary you are going to get all feature. All feature would be depend on the license. So for example, let's say you purchase a 5060 series of the firewall. So it is not necessary that on the firewall you are going to get all the feature. You have to purchase the feature, and which is known as a subscription. Okay, so feature would depend on the subscription as well. And in a higher end model firewall, you are going to get swappable fan and power supply. That means if there is any issue on the power supply, you want to change it. Okay, basically you would going to get dual power supply and dual fan on these firewall. So if there is any issue on the power supply, Okay, so you don't need to shut down the firewall. You can remove the firewall, remove the power supply while firewall is on. Also, these firewall having a dual solid state hard drive. Okay, what is this solid state hard drive use? So in this hard drive, operating system of the firewall would be installed. So there would be two hard drive, okay, that would be dual and working parallelly. So if let's say one hard drive gets fail, even though your operating system of the firewall would be running through another hard drive. These higher end model having a dedicated HA interface and dedicated management interface. So if you just want to manage firewall, so basically you can manage your firewall using management interface. So there is a dedicated management interface, and also there is a dedicated HA interface. And if you want, if you just want to put into the rack, okay, so how much space in the data center or in the rack it is going to take? It is going to take 2U state, sorry, 2 unit, I can say 2 unit size, it is going to take into the rack. This is 2K appliance. You can see this is in 2K appliance, this much having the capacity, 100 Mbps firewall throughput, 50 Mbps threat prevention throughput, 50 Mbps IPsec VPN throughput, up to 64K maximum session it can create. So this is for the small user. If there is a small user set, and to prevent that, if you just want to use a firewall, so you can go with this firewall, right? Sorry. Now I'm talking about centralized management. So let's say you have multiple firewall in the organization. Those firewall you just want to manage from the central location. So for that, what you can do, you can use a Panorama device, and through Panorama you can integrate your different data center firewall or different branch offices firewall, and from single location you can manage all the firewall, right? So Panorama you can deploy as a appliance. This is a physical hardware that you can purchase from the Palo Alto, or Panorama you can also install on the virtual machine. If you have a VMware, there you can install the Panorama virtual machine. Now I would talk about security subscriptions. So these are the security subscription we have. We have threat prevention, we have URL filtering, we have global protect and wildfire. So these are the license basically. So if you just want to use IPS feature, you have to install threat prevention license. If you want that your firewall should able to filter the URLs, that means in the firewall, if you just want to browse a website, and those website you just want to control that user should be able to browse a particular category and should not be able to browse a specific category. So on that cases, you can use URL filtering license. We have global protector. So if you just want to use remote VPN feature, for that we have global protector. And then we have wildfire. This is the subscription. This is used for the sandboxing. So if you want to use firewall as a sandboxing, so for that you can use wildfire license. So these are the licenses we have, and we have to purchase this license from the Palo Alto vendor. Now moving to next, this is a flow logic. We have already discussed this flow logic earlier. How the packet is going to flow. The packet is going to flow at 5 stages: initial packet processing, security pre-policy check, application checks, security policy checks, and the post policy processing. Now I would talk about the physical interface. In the firewall, we have a interfaces, and that we can configure in a different mode. Okay, we will see that we can configure firewall interface in tap mode. So in tap mode, this is going to simply listen the packet, and it is going to work as a span or mirror port of a switch. We have a virtual wire. So what is the virtual wire basically? If you configure interface in the virtual wire mode, so what it is going to do, exactly two interface you can put into the virtual wire. So whatever the traffic is coming in one interface, it is going to pass that traffic to another interface. Okay, so virtual wire is going to, wire is also known as a bump in the wire. So virtual wire you can configure as a inline. So the firewall is going to scan the traffic, okay, but it is not going to do any kind of routing. Okay, in virtual wire you can use a copper interface, fiber interface, or copper fiber interface. That means if you just want to put an interface into the virtual wire, right? So either you can use a copper interface, or fiber interface, or copper fiber combination of the interface into the virtual wire. If you are using a virtual wire, okay, so virtual wire is not going to store any MAC address or IP address in the interface, okay, and the devices would be still working as a stateful firewall, and it would be able to block the traffic. We have layer 2 interface. Layer 2 interface you can use as a virtual switch into the Palo Alto firewall. So if you just want to create a VLAN, etc., that you can use as a layer 2. And then we have layer 3. This is basically if in the firewall you just want to do routing as well. So you can use layer 3 interface. And then finally we have HA interface. When you are going to configure a firewall in a high availability mode, so for that HA interface would be required. Okay, so you can configure your interface as a HA. Now I would talk about logical interfaces. Okay, so in firewall we have a logical interface. Okay, sub interface is part of logical interface. So on Palo Alto firewall you can create a sub interfaces. If you want to bundle the interfaces, okay, like port channel you just want to configure, so you can use aggregate interface. If you just want to create IPsec VPN or SSL VPN, for that you can use tunnel interface. And then finally we have a loopback interface in the Palo Alto firewall. This is used for the self-testing. Palo Alto firewall is going to support multicast as well. Okay, so if you have any kind of multicast traffic, that also can be allowed into the Palo Alto firewall. Example of multicast traffic is, let's say we have OSPF routing updates that you used to send usually on the multicast. Okay, so yeah, OSPF routing updates can be passed through the Palo Alto firewall. Okay, there are some features that would not be available or may available when you are using interface in a different mode. So if you are using a vWire, okay, if you have configured vWire in the Palo Alto firewall, on that case you can't configure the VPN. Okay, and for HA link you can't configure the auto option. Okay, we will talk about HA link later. Okay, but for now just understand no VPN and no auto setting for the HA passive link. We have layer 2 mode. In this mode you can't configure the VPN. Okay, and earlier you won't be able to configure netting as well, but now you can configure netting as well. Earlier it was not supporting multicast, but now it is supporting multicast. We have a layer 3 mode. In layer 3 mode you can configure everything including your VPN, etc. Okay, so next thing is a interface management profile. I would talk about that, but for this you require a lab access. So did you get the lab access so far?
Um, you
Did
mean
you
if I
get?
should go?
Yeah. Go ahead.
You mean if I should go to the lab?
Yeah, yeah. You require a lab access for this. Okay. What I just want to do, I just want to, you know, make you understand that how you can get the lab access. Okay. And once you get the lab access, then we can talk about the interface management profile where I would try to configure, and later you can also configure this.
Yeah, yeah. My concern is I'm unable to go to lab
Okay.
because when I go into the website, your website, I saw Palo Alto over there, but I can't access it. It's like I have to pay some money before I can be able to go into it.
So have you talked to Joya?
Yeah, I talked to her. She said she will send me the link to go about it. Because when I go into the NetMinion
Mm-hmm.
and I created a password and everything, I was able to go into NetMinion. So when
Mm-hmm.
I go into NetMinion, I saw some other programs that is there. I saw Palo Alto,
Mm-hmm.
and underneath they wrote $99 to be able to access it. So I can go into it. I've sent series of text messages to her for me to be able to access it there. She said she will get back to me, talk to you, then get back to me. Yet I haven't got any information.
So I hope you got you paid for this one, this lab access.
Yeah, I pay for these classes, the training I'm going through. Now I pay for the training. But the
Okay.
lab is the issue. Because I listened to some of the other trainings, other things that you have there, and how to access the training, the lab, but I'm unable to go through it.
Oh, Joya is there?
Because my thought is that maybe I can be using the lab practice to get
Mm-hmm.
more experience, but I'm unable to. I got a laptop, then to try to access things in my laptop, I can't do anything.
Okay, just give me a minute. So you might got, the link of our class, and there you would be getting meeting ID and password code. So you can type here zoom.us or the URL which is shared by.